for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your. I
also want to talk about specifically how many of our ICE agents have been docked and what they have tried to insert into the city. So I want to say thank you to every single person that has been able to do this.
Hands up, hands up.
Also, I want to talk
Senator
specifically
I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your.
I also want to talk about specifically how many of our ICE agents have been doxxed for doing their duty, how they have been targeted, and how their families have.
I recognize the Democrat leader.
I mentioned a few minutes ago that I had seen a video that sickened my stomach. A U.S. senator being manhandled, we now know, by federal agents and dragged out of a hearing room. Now there's a second video. It's even worse. He's been thrown to the ground, again, manhandled, brutally taken down, handcuffed. It was disgusting. Anyone who looks at it turns anyone who looks at this, it will turn their stomach to look at this video and see what happened. Reeks of totalitarianism. This is not what democracies do. Senator Padilla was there, legitimately in that building, to ask questions of what's going on in California, which everybody wants to know answers to. We don't get answers when we ask the administration questions in one way or another. So Senator Padilla was exercising his duty as a senator for his constituents to try and find out what happened. And instead, he gets manhandled, thrown out of the room, thrown out on the ground, and handcuffed. We need a full investigation immediately as to what happened and who did what and what's going to be done to see that this doesn't happen again to Senator Padilla or other American citizens who are seeking their right to redress. It's despicable. It's disgusting. It is so un-American. So un-American. We need answers. We need answers immediately. I yield the floor. I yield to my colleague from New Mexico.
Mr. President, while retaining the right to the floor.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I just watched footage of our colleague, my California colleague, Senator Alex Padilla, being forcibly removed from a briefing by the Secretary of Homeland Security's staff. He went there to observe and to ask questions, and I watched with horror on this video, seeing these agents grab my colleague, my fellow senator from California, grab him, push him out of the hearing as he was identifying himself as a U.S. senator, bring him into a hallway, bring him down to the ground, bring his arms behind his back. I saw this happen to my colleague, and I am shocked by how far we have descended in the first 140 days of this administration, where we have a president calling out the military over the objection of a governor to try to intimidate and interfere with law enforcement in California, calling out the Marines to try to inflame tensions in our city, and now this latest act when a U.S. senator goes to demand questions about the lawfulness or lawlessness of these actions, to see him tackled to the ground, brought to the ground. What is becoming of our democracy? Are there no limits to what this administration will do? Is there no line they will not cross? We see lawlessness after lawlessness. We see threats to judges of impeachment and of physical harm. We see arrests of members of Congress. And now this. All of us have lived as part of a generation since World War II that was used to seeing our freedoms ever expanding. We saw walls coming down. We saw new democracies being born. We came to think that somehow this was inevitable, like the laws of nature, that it was the moral arc of the universe always bending towards justice. only to see that it was not bending towards justice, and to see this now at home, to see in the United States of America the executive use force like this against a member of a co-equal branch of government, to see that it has come to this already, and not a peep yet from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, no whisper of dissent yet. I hope that changes. I hope that changes. The founders separated the powers between the executive and the legislative and the judiciary because they wanted to set ambition against ambition, ambition of one institution against another to protect all of our freedom. But that requires that we go beyond our partisan affiliations. And when something is wrong, dead wrong, when something is a threat to our democracy, that we call it out regardless of party. And this is wrong. This is wrong. We ask, how do you lose a democracy? How does one lose a democracy? This is how you lose a democracy. Actions like today, but even more importantly than what has just happened is what will happen in the next 24 hours. Will this be roundly condemned? Will this be roundly condemned, or somehow will we just fall down some partisan line again and see another leap towards autocracy in this country? Alex Padilla is one of the most decent people I know, one of the most dedicated public servants I know, someone of just the greatest character. We all know him well in this institution. He embodies public service. He never forgot where he came from. He came from very humble origins, and he never forgot where he came from. And the beauty of this country is you could come from a very humble origin, and you could end up here. When I first got here, John Tester, a farmer from Montana and a senator from Montana, told me about a conversation he had with John D. Rockefeller when he got here, and he said, Rockefeller told him, you and I came from very different places, but we both ended up here. It's the beauty of America that Alex Padilla could end up here by dint of his brilliance and his integrity and his compassion. And all of that is at risk. All that is at risk right now if we let the abusive handling of this good man and so many other good men and women around the country, if we let this go without our firmest opposition, without our strongest pushback, without our strongest defense of our democracy. And with that, I ask the gentleman from New Jersey whether he will yield to the gentlewoman to my right.
I intend to yield, but...
I don't mean yield, but yield for a question.
May I, excuse me, let me consult the parliamentarian for just a second.
President.
The senator from Hawaii.
You know, I've given a lot of speeches on this floor, and this is the least prepared but the most clear I will ever be. This is the stuff of dictatorships. It is actually happening. A United States senator was manhandled, shoved to the ground, and cuffed. He identified himself. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. That should be enough. That should be enough. A United States senator who is, by the way, protected by the speech and debate clauses of the Constitution of the United States and a specific statute that allows him to oversee immigration facilities. And he says, I'm a senator and I have a question. And to Chris Murphy's point, they said, well, he was being disrespectful. Being disrespectful is legal. Being disrespectful is American. Being disruptive is okay if it's just using your words and not your body. This is the stuff of dictatorships, and the thing that is making me most terrified is I see 0 Republicans, except for the presiding officer, in this chamber. And I understand, if it's not a member of your own party, you want some context. There is no context that justifies this action. Alex Padilla is not required to be impeccable in every single way in order to exercise his responsibilities as an American and as one of the two that represents California in the United States Senate. This is the stuff of dictatorships. One of the officers who throws him to the ground, as he's clearly complying, cuffs him face down on the carpet. And they say, there's no recording in here. It's a damn press conference. It's for recording. They didn't want to hear his speaking. And if the internet got it accurately, the secretary was there and delivering her remarks within earshot the whole time. She has command authority over those agents who are arresting a leader in the legislative branch. This is not some thing on the internet for us to argue about. We all know what we saw. We all know what we saw. I remain hopeful that Leader Thune and other Republicans can walk us back from the brink. But I am not so sure anymore. So as Trump's Department of Homeland Security raises the stakes and continues with a series of provocations to justify increasingly authoritarian actions, we have two obligations. One is to establish that as a legislative branch, we are not going to stand for this. And the other is those people who are peacefully protesting, be very disciplined this weekend. Be very peaceful this weekend. If we are going to win, we need to maintain the high ground. And I don't mean we blue, we Democrats. I mean we Americans who believe in this system of government. I have never, ever, other than January 6th, been so outraged at the conduct of an administration. I yield the floor.
From Arizona.
Mr. President, I have to say this week stood out for me personally with some positive notes and some real downers. The week didn't start great. We saw the President of the United States, for the first time, I think, in possibly my lifetime, send troops without a request from a governor into a state because people were protesting. And sure, some could make an argument that maybe a few protesters got over somebody's perceived line, but they were largely peaceful protests. And what the president did is beyond his authority. It's illegal. And it was not a good start to the week, I have to say. But Mr. President, I also have to say there were some positive things this week. I got to meet your grandson. I think he said he was 15 years old. He got to go to the Air and Space Museum, a place that I love, a place that makes our country stand out in the best of ways. You know, shows what we can do when we work together, when we bring the full force of the United States behind doing things that are positive. We sent people to the moon in the 1960s. Your grandson got to see some of that hardware over at the Air and Space Museum. But I also have to say that the end of this week was rather outrageous and horrific. And it was brought to the American people, I strongly believe, because of the attitudes of this president and his ability to just work outside of the boundaries of what most Americans feel are in accordance with our values and our ethics. What happened today to Senator Padilla was outrageous. It was violent. It's a scary thing to see happen in the United States of America. Alex Padilla is a great guy. He is thoughtful. He is passionate. He is just trying to serve his constituents in the best way he knows how. By doing the thing that is in our Constitution, freedom of speech, Article 1, by exercising his constitutional rights and his rights as a United States Senator to ask some questions of government officials. He was doing his job. His job is oversight. Oversight of the Department of Homeland Security. This is in a federal building, and this didn't happen in isolation. The Trump administration has arrested a mayor and a member of Congress and a labor leader. The other day, I think, I mentioned the one highlight of this week, which was your grandkid, and the low light is, besides this, at the end of the week, is what happened at Fort Bragg the other day. The President of the United States going to a U.S. military base and using soldiers as political props. That is not who we are as a country. And I have to say, Mr. President, what I saw today is leading us down a dangerous path. And we cannot retreat to partisan corners. Senator Schatz mentioned, other than you, Mr. President, I don't think there are any other Republicans showing outrage for one of their colleagues on the other side of the aisle being violently handled by law enforcement. This is wrong. This is not putting our country first. And I have to say, I hope we can turn things around here in the coming weeks. But in my lifetime, and certainly my time in public office and my time serving this country, I have never seen anything like I have seen this week. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Had a great conversation, sat down, talked for 10, 15 minutes about operations in LA, some activities of the Department of Homeland Security, and so I thought it was very productive, and I wish that he would have reached out and identified himself and let us know who he was and that he wanted to talk. His approach, was something that I don't think was appropriate at all. But the conversation was great, and we're going to continue to communicate. We exchanged phone numbers, and we're going to continue to talk on ways we can communicate better.
Why did you detain him? Why was that the action you decided to take?
I'll let the law enforcement speak to how this situation was handled, but I will say that it's people need to identify themselves before they start lunging at people that during press conferences.
Is it appropriate?
But once he said he was
Did he apologize, Secretary?
Or which agency?
Since the beginning of the year, but especially over the course of recent weeks, several of my colleagues, have been asking the Department of Homeland Security for more information and more answers on their increasingly extreme immigration enforcement actions. And we've gotten little to no information in response to our inquiries. And so I came to the press conference to hear what she had to say, to see if I could learn any new additional information. And at one point, I had a question. And let me emphasize, just as we've emphasized the right for people to peacefully protest and to stand up for their First Amendment rights, for our fundamental rights. I was there peacefully. At one point, I had a question. And so I began to ask a question. I was almost immediately forcibly removed from the room. I was forced to the ground, and I was handcuffed. I was not arrested. I was not detained. I will say this. If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, if this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California and throughout the country. We will hold this administration accountable. And we'll have more to say. We'll have more to say in the coming days. Let me say just briefly in Spanish as well. Soy el senador Alex Padilla y estuve aquí porque tuve una junta para recibir más información de los representantes de la administración, especialmente porque desde el principio del término de Donald Trump, y especialmente esta última semana por lo que ha ocurrido aquí en la región de Los Ángeles, hemos pedido más información para entender las pólizas, las estrategias de la administración. Las respuestas han sido mínimas. Tuve una junta aquí para recibir más información cuando me di cuenta que la secretaria Noem tenía una rueda de prensa en el mismo edificio, en el mismo piso. Calmamente fui a escuchar para ver si podría aprender algo nuevo sobre los esfuerzos y las acciones del departamento. A un punto de la rueda de prensa, traté de hacer una pregunta. Muy calmado, todo tranquilo, tuve una pregunta y casi inmediatamente los agentes me sacaron, me forzaron de la sala. Primero me hicieron hincar, después completamente al piso me pusieron esposas. No me arrestaron, no me detenieron. Pero una gran pregunta es esta. Si esta es la reacción a un senador con una pregunta, imagínense lo que están haciendo con cocineros, jornaleros, campesinos y otros inmigrantes no violentos en la comunidad de Los Ángeles, en otras áreas del estado de California y en el país. No voy a tomar preguntas en este momento, pero sí quise explicar lo que ocurrió y tendremos más que decir en los días que vienen. Just want to once again, for not just the community here in Los Angeles, but throughout the country, because there is a lot of concern, there is a lot of tension, there is a lot of anxiety, and a lot of people are beginning to make plans for what they may or may not do come this Saturday. I encourage everybody to please peacefully protest, just like I was calmly and peacefully listening in that press conference and preparing, attempting to ask a question. No violence, no vandalism. Please continue peacefully protesting, and that's all I will have to say today. Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, I stand today and I am shaking. I am so angry. I am so enraged with the treatment that I witnessed today of my colleague, Senator Padilla. This is not the America that each of us comes here each day to stand on behalf of. There are some who are saying they don't recognize this America, and I want to ring the bell today for all who are watching, for all who are listening. We have now crossed the line. This is a dangerous day in the history of our country, when a senator who was in a federal building where he had a right to be, to do an oversight responsibility on behalf of the citizens who have elected him to the Senate of the United States. And when he was there to carry out his duties, he was there peacefully, and he decided to ask a question. And in Donald Trump's America, asking a question and pushing back caused him to be manhandled for the whole world to see. Manhandled, treated like a person who had come off the streets. The thuggish behavior that I saw today is absolutely unacceptable. To put hands on this peaceful man who is not only a senator, he's a father, he's a husband, he's a person, he's a venerable part of our society, who was there on behalf of the people who have elected him and who was treated violently today. You could see his hands up in the air. You could see his hands up in the air, and that was not enough. He was taken to the ground and he was handcuffed And what was the explanation that was given? It was an explanation that any reasonable person can look and knows will be a full-on lie, that he looked like an attacker. Well, if this doesn't cause every person under the sound of my voice to shudder today, I don't know what to say about it, because today it's Senator Padilla, and you know what? Tomorrow it can be any one of us. This is not what democracy looks like. This is anything but a democracy. The right to free speech is sacred in our country. The right to free speech is sacred. And today we watched it violated in horrible ways that we will account for. We as a country, if we continue along this road, I tell you, we will account for it. It was Dr. Martin Luther King who said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it does bend toward justice. This injustice cannot stand. This cannot stand. And I tell you, America, let's be careful. We cannot continue along this road. We absolutely cannot. We must continue to encourage and allow free speech. It is the right of every person in this country. And today I am sickened and I am angry, and something must happen. These people must be held to account for what happened to Senator Padilla today. I yield.
Mr. President.
The senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, you can see and feel and hear the anger, the disappointment, the concern for the future of our country.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon.
I was on my way to the floor to talk about clean energy policy this afternoon, but I have got to join my colleagues in addressing the shocking video out of Los Angeles. I've now looked at it. If you're following at home, our colleague, Senator Padilla, was carrying out his constitutional responsibilities to conduct oversight and defend the people he represents. And at that time, he was physically accosted and shoved out of a press conference, pushed to the ground, and handcuffed at a press conference being held by Kristi Noem. It is a horrifying video, truly horrifying. And I'm of the view, Mr. President, why I especially wanted to come to the floor. It is not about a happening to a United States senator. Here is what it's about. If they'll do this to a sitting United States senator in front of a room full of media, imagine what is being done to powerless people in secret. In Portland, in my hometown, we've had firsthand experience with this kind of activity. Faceless, unidentifiable agents with guns staring down peaceful protesters. In Portland, it was a wall of moms. My neighbors, we all said then it's un-American, and I say it again this afternoon. What we have seen on our screens is un-American. It doesn't have the support of the American people for this kind of anti-democratic conduct. And I'll close simply by saying this, Mr. President. This has got to change. Peaceful Americans cannot have this kind of abuse rain down on them for the next 3.5 years. It has to end now. I yield the floor.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, this feels like a defining moment for the country, but also for this body. I understand that it may take a few moments for our Republican colleagues to watch the full video, to gather some additional facts, to come to a conclusion. But we need our Republican colleagues to be on the floor right now with us. This is not simply an assault on Senator Padilla. This is not an assault on Democratic senators. This is an assault on the rule of law. This is an assault on our democracy. And ultimately, we are robbing the ability of every single senator to do our job if we are now going to be threatened with violence when we simply try to stand up for our constituents. Now, we all have town halls, and we are all often met with constituents who oppose us, sometimes very vocally. But speaking for myself, I don't ask law enforcement to throw my constituents to the ground and violently handcuff them because they have a different opinion from me. You know why I don't do that? Because we don't do that in a democracy. We don't do that against ordinary citizens, and we certainly don't allow the administration and the law enforcement that works for the administration to do that to a United States senator. We will enter a banana republic if we don't find a way, Republicans and Democrats, to come together around this essential question of protecting our ability, our right as senators to speak up for our constituents. Now, I understand that my Republican colleagues are going to need some time to gather the facts, but we already have a statement from the Department of Homeland Security that has accused Senator Padilla of being disrespectful, as if that is a rationalization for violence. Watch the video. Even if you believe that he was disrespectful, and given the times, that is certainly in the eye of the beholder, that never justifies what we saw on that video. Throwing anyone, never mind an elected representative of the people, to the ground to be handcuffed. They say that he didn't identify who he was, and yet watch the video. He clearly states, "I am Senator Alex Padilla." They're going to spin this, but I'm begging my Republican colleagues, don't let them do it. Protect our ability as servants of the people to speak up for the people that we represent. Make sure that we do not normalize this kind of violence simply because the White House doesn't agree with people who dissent. If this is how a United States senator can be treated, then none of us ultimately are immune. If this is how a United States senator can be treated, none of our constituents are safe. This is a test for the country, but this is a test for the United States Senate as well. I yield the floor.
The senator from Virginia.
Mr.
Just a second. The 10 minutes allotted to the senator under morning business has expired. Another senator may seek recognition in his or her own right. The senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor this afternoon to the United States Senate, a place where people are elected by their constituents to come here to be their voice. Every one of us, Republican, Democrat, elected by the people who we represent, to come here and be their voice and to do the job. What is that job? To make sure that we are being their voice and speaking out for them, and part of that has to be asking questions. That part of that has to be demanding accountability. That has to be getting information so we can do the best job possible. It is unacceptable that a United States senator in his own home state, elected by millions of people, went to ask a question for his constituents to get an answer and was brutally thrown to the ground and handcuffed. That is wrong, and I cannot believe that we don't have senators on both sides of the aisle calling this out as outrageous. This is what a democracy is about, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is about us coming to the United States Senate, speaking out, asking questions, getting information so we can be their voice. What happens when that voice is stifled? What happens when that voice is thrown to the floor and handcuffed? Our democracy is lost. Mr. President, I have been here for more than 32 years. I have come to this floor often to speak out, to be angry, to be a voice for my people. I have never come this close to having tears in my eyes as I speak to both sides of this aisle about this horrendous incident that occurred. We are a democracy, but we can lose that democracy. It can be gone unless all of us speak out and forcibly reject what happened to a United States Senator, and to send the message that in this democracy, it is just, it is right, it is part of our responsibility to speak up, to ask questions, and to be able to have the knowledge we need to represent the people that we come here for. We use our voices, Mr. President. We use our votes, Mr. President, to be a part of this democracy, not violence. When violence is done by someone representing this administration in a forceful way against a United States Senator, how does any one of us go home and tell our constituents that they can be part of a democracy, speak out about what they believe in? This is so wrong. This is so wrong. Mr. President, I hope others speak up and speak out, and as a voice we say, we want our democracy to succeed, and in order to succeed, we need to be able to use our voices and to use our votes and to ask questions without being forcibly thrown to the ground, without being arrested, by speaking up. I say to the entire country, we have a democracy. We will lose it if we can't use our voices. We will lose this democracy. None of us should be silent. None of us. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Together, I associate myself with your remarks and will only add that this assault on Senator Padilla today was an assault on freedom of speech in our country. These thugs who manhandled the senator probably don't know it's a federal offense to attack a member of Congress. But that's not what it's about. It shouldn't be anybody in our country to be treated this way. So when we speak out for Senator Padilla, we're speaking out for everyone who has a right to speak. How about it? It goes to a Trump administration press conference, seeks clarification, and gets thrown to the ground by thugs. This is just absolutely wrong. Just absolutely wrong. We want everyone to know that we see it wrong, not just for a senator or a member of Congress, but for every person in our country. I'm so glad that our delegation, which is so strong, 43 Democrats strong in California out of 52, stand in solidarity with Senator Padilla, but stand in solidarity with everyone who wants to ask a question of our government about their safety. I yield back.
Mr. President, you can see and feel and hear the anger, the disappointment, the concern for the future of our country. Senator Alex Padilla is probably one of the first people that took time to sit down with me as a freshman senator, to prepare me for this job. He serves this body and his state with intelligence and with grace and with poise. And so to see my colleague pushed, manhandled, taken to the ground, arms put behind his back, this person who anyone who meets will say is more of a gentle giant than someone who deserves that kind of treatment. It blows my mind. I think that's the thing. I am shocked. I am numb. I am angry. And I think part of it is because Senator Padilla is a senator, but there are people every day, right now, across this country who are facing this kind of concern of their treatment, of peacefully trying to exhibit the voice of America. But also for him, he was just doing his job of oversight. Similarly, some of us also have spoken up about LaMonica McIver from New Jersey, also a member of Congress doing her job, oversight. If we don't have the ability as senators and congresspeople, what does that mean for all of the citizens of this country? And so in this moment, this is a pivotal moment. This is an opportunity for our leadership here in this chamber, as well as the other members on Democratic side and the Republican side, to say this is unacceptable. That's really what this is about. When the incident happened, we were all on this floor. And I remember seeing the video and the shock that I felt. It literally took my breath away. And I turned to other members on the floor to say, have you seen this? And they had not seen it. I walked across the aisle to my Republican colleagues. They had not seen it. And there was a sense of shock as well. And so what remains to be seen is what we do with that shock, what we do with that indignation, what we do with the fact that Alex Padilla was doing his job on behalf of his constituents and on behalf of this country. That's what remains to be seen. Where do we go from here? And so you have heard folks talk about free speech, peaceful assembly, the ability to do our jobs of oversight. But ultimately, what this is about the foundation of this country. And so I'm just shaking my head. I'm shaking my head, but I'm also resolute in the fact that we were called here for this moment. As bad as things may be, as bad as they may seem, we were called here for such a time as this. And the question is, what do we do with this time? And so, Mr. President, I ask my colleagues, again, on both sides of the aisle, to speak up against not only this incident, but the incidents that we are seeing across this country. I ask my colleagues to come together on behalf of not only the American people, but the democracy on which this country stands. And I will continue to stand with Alex Padilla. I will continue to stand with those folks around this country who are facing this same kind of unacceptable behavior. Lastly, I would also mention that we do have a role and responsibility. There are 3 branches of government. Thank God for the courts right now holding it down. But this moment is the moment. There won't be a light switch that says, oh, democracy is gone. That's not how it happens. I've heard my good friend Chris Murphy talk about that it's piece by piece, moment by moment, we see it chipped away. Well, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that we do not let this slip away. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back.
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from New Mexico.
Mr. President, I'm sure the American people right now are just starting to see what happened to the United States Senator from California, the senior senator from California, Alex Padilla. He's at a press conference in California where the Secretary of Homeland Security is, and he wants to ask some questions. With all this going on in California, look, I don't know what all happened. Federal agents took him down. Took down a United States senator that they're doing their job. Why aren't more people down here speaking up about this nonsense? This is ridiculous. I'd use some other language, but I'd probably get tossed off the floor right now. Growing up on a small farm and cleaning a barn, my dad taught me how to take a shovel to all the stuff that came out of the animals. You know what that's called. I know what it's called. And some of the animals that did that were males. They were bulls. And the stuff that came out of them has a few names to it. I'll call it manure today. This is nonsense. This is awful. How can these federal agents get away with this? Is the President of the United States telling folks to go down and start arresting United States senators, taking them down to the floor? Is that what we've come to? The executive branch doing this to our colleagues? This is a Democrat. What happens when it happens to a Republican? Will I hear from my Republican colleagues then to say, no, we should not do this, Mr. President? Back down, back off, you are wrong? Will someone here have the backbone to tell the President of the United States, you crossed the line, stop it? I'm so disappointed. So disappointed. And as a Latino United States Senator, for this to happen to another Hispanic here, there's several of us that are Hispanics here, Democrats and Republicans. Speak up. When one of my predecessors was here, Dennis Chavez, there were places he could not eat in this town because of the color of his skin, because he was from a state called New Mexico. Are we going to use our voices? Are we better than this in the United States of America? Or are we going to show all the other folks in the world that choose to do this to the people that were duly elected by their people? No, just go arrest them, throw them down on their face, treat them like garbage. We're better than this in America, y'all. We got to speak up. I hope by tonight every Democrat and Republican member of this body has the courage to say something. This has gone too far. It's not right. I yield back.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I come to the floor to join my colleagues to express outrage over the actions taking place in Los Angeles when our dear colleague, Alex Padilla, Senator Padilla, was thrown out of an event where he was just simply trying to express his opinion on behalf of the millions of Californians that he represents. It's so interesting to me that this situation happened because not that long ago in the state of Washington, in Olympia, we had a bill signing, and it's no secret in the state of Washington that a guy named Tim Eyman is probably the antithesis of what our governor, Bob Ferguson, believes. He fights him on all sorts of initiatives to the people about policies that Mr. Eyman wants to express. So he's a noted individual in our state. So Mr. Eyman shows up at a press conference to basically protest a bill that the governor is going to sign. And he gets into the governor's office and he stands right behind our governor. One of our legislators who basically wants the governor to know that this individual who he disagrees with doesn't support this bill has now snuck into the governor's press conference. So what does our governor do? He turns around and he looks at Mr. Eyman and he says, "Oh, why are you here?" And he said, "I'm here to protest this." And the governor turns around and delivers his remarks. Because you know why? Because our governor was not afraid what Tim Eyman said. Our governor didn't think you threw him out of the building, and he's just a constituent. It's not like he's a state rep. It's not like he got elected by people. Our governor was not afraid to let this voice be heard. But somehow, ICE and Homeland Security are afraid of the voice of Alex Padilla. They are afraid of Alex Padilla's presence in a room. Now, how can that be in the United States of America, that a senator elected by the people of his state who simply wants to go to a public meeting and have his voice heard on behalf of his constituents is handcuffed and thrown to the ground? It's not acceptable. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle need to say this is not acceptable. Are we trying to freeze the voice of dissent? Are we trying to say that we cannot understand what true public policy discourse is about? I think we showed in Olympia, Washington, that we're big enough to take it, that we know that somebody disagrees with us, we're not going to get them thrown out. And in this case, to have a United States senator handcuffed and thrown to the ground is disrespectful. It is an atrocity. We need to understand how this is happening. And if this administration or this side of the aisle thinks that is the way you treat the voice of a United States senator expressing dissent, I thank the president, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from New Jersey.
I never thought I would imagine having to stand here and discuss what I saw today. A United States senator in his own community, in the city in which he grew up, elected under the authority of the people, stepping forward to get answers to legitimate questions. And we see him being thrown to the ground after being removed from a room forcibly and put into handcuffs by multiple people. This, to me, is such an abuse of authority. It is a violent act, and there can be no justification of seeing a senator forced to their knees, laid flat on the ground, their hands twisted behind their back, and being put into restraints. If you see the video, at that point, he's not fighting, he's not pushing. But this is a pattern and a practice. This is not an isolated incident. I remind people that in my own community, in the city of Newark, we had a congresswoman and a mayor at a facility. The mayor invited into the gate the Congress people, invited into a conference room, and then the mayor asked to leave, who did leave, and then numerous agents run out to arrest that mayor. Now, the judge in this case said it was outrageous, reprimanded the Trump administration for the arrest in and of itself. We see time and time again with this administration trying to precipitate a response by the misuse and the abuse of force. This is more akin to authoritarian governments. When you see a democratic nation having their executive begin to arrest mayors, begin to arrest judges, begin to arrest a United States senator who is simply asking for answers to their questions, to remove them from a room forcibly, to throw them to the ground, to put them in restraints. This is something that we should not tolerate. And by we, this is not Democrats and Republicans. This is we in this body. We have a constitutional obligation to provide oversight to the executive, a constitutional obligation to ask questions, to make inquiries, a constitutional obligation to check and balance the authority of the executive. And so here we saw before our eyes a senator in their district, in their state, asking questions, and we see him being shoved out of a room, but it did not stop there. Shoved to the ground, shoved onto his belly, and have his arms pulled behind his back. This should outrage every United States senator. This should outrage every United States senator. I would like to yield the floor to my colleague.
I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Excuse me, I would like to
question.
I would yield to a question.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
I will yield to a question while retaining the right to the floor.
As the senator from Oregon.
Thank you. I ask the quorum call be vitiated.
The Senate is not in a quorum call?
I've come to the floor to say I'm extremely outraged that the executive branch's security team have shoved a U.S. senator out of a room, have proceeded to put that U.S. senator on the ground and to handcuff that senator. This is what we expect to see in authoritarian nations. They can't tolerate a question, and they start to attack the institutions. This is what we're seeing in the U.S. right now. We're seeing it in the form of the president willfully breaking the law on the rules controlling the executive branch time and time again. We see it in his attack on the press, his attack on the universities, his attack on extorting law firms. We see it in the form of his using the Trump versus United States lawsuit to say, I, the president, am above the law, and I can issue pardons, so the whole executive branch is above the law. That is not the way it works in a republic. At least, it's not the way it works if we are a republic. If we, through a subservient Congress and a combination with a deferential Supreme Court, slide into this authoritarian state, then we have failed our oath to the Constitution. It is absolutely wrong that any U.S. senator, for attempting to ask a question, be treated in this fashion. I double down on the call of Leader Schumer. This merits a full bipartisan investigation. Bipartisan because all of us are members of the legislative branch. All of us have taken an oath to the Constitution, and all of us should stand up for each other and certainly our ability to explore the policies of this administration. Thank you, Mr. President.
I want to thank Leader Jeffries and Senator Schiff, Joe Lofgren, the California delegation, and all of our colleagues. Senator Padilla is living the American dream. He's representing 40 million Californians. He is in his office building, the federal office building where he offices. And it is a crime to lay your hands on a federal official. That's what happened today. Senator Padilla was speaking on behalf, as his job, 40 million Californians who have reasonable questions and disagreements with this administration. This administration that promised to lower the costs that people have on day one. But what are they doing instead? They're militarizing that federal building, and they're preventing people from asking Kristi Noem questions. And as Senator Schiff said, that is their job. That is our job. But he is speaking for all of us. He is speaking for Californians when he is asking these important questions and conducting oversight. And the fact that Kristi Noem's security detail would detain him, take him to the ground, it's unconscionable. And it's un-American. We need answers. We don't need reports. We need answers from Senator Thune, from Speaker Johnson. We need answers to these questions because Donald Trump's administration is unhinged. Secretary Hegseth is lying across the street. just as he was lying all week. And Kristi Noem has no answers to any of these questions. And we are demanding answers, and we are demanding accountability. And this caucus of Democrats will not stand until we get that.
This despicable incident took place in my district today. But let me first say, House Democrats have been pushing back and fighting back against the unjust actions of ICE, who have deported a lot of children, including U.S. citizens. They wrongfully detained U.S. citizens. They have taken actions that violate the law. And now we have this, where they forcibly took down a U.S. senator because he dared to ask questions of Secretary Noem. Why is she afraid to answer questions? And we have a call to action. More and more Americans are now going to righteously exercise your right to protest. Go forth and righteously exercise your right to monitor actions of ICE. Go forth and righteously exercise your right to attend town halls and rallies. The way we hold this administration accountable is for the American people to rise up and peacefully exercise your rights to make your voices heard.
All right.
We have a senior member.
Press, we need you. We need you. We need you to hold them accountable. Media, it's your country. We need you. So make sure you hold them accountable. Don't cover the distractions. Cover the actions that lead us towards authoritarianism. Please.
Amen.
Secretary Noem needs to resign.
Eric,
let me say, as the second most senior member of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem needs to come to our committee and answer questions. ICE needs to show their faces. No more masks like 1,800 bank robbers or Russian KGB agents in the streets. And stop terrorizing families. So what can you do at home? It's No King's Day this Saturday. 2,000 rallies across America. Americans need to show up, because if we don't show up, democracy dies.
we have votes that have been called.
This is what fascism looks like. I'd like to say a few words.
Mr. President.
The senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, having just viewed a video of my friend and colleague, Senator Alex Padilla, being manhandled, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed, after identifying himself as Senator Alex Padilla and attempting to ask a question of the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, in Los Angeles, I am shaken. I am angry, and I am gravely concerned about our path forward in this body and our nation. Democracy is a gift hard-won and hard-earned by the sacrifice of millions who have served, fought, and died, some in moments of tumult and challenge on the beaches of Normandy, on the fields of Gettysburg. From the very beginning of our nation to this moment, millions of Americans have stepped forward and said, I will risk it all so that my children and those I do not know can live free lives, knowing the burdens of tyranny, knowing what it meant to live under the heel of a king. Our forefathers risked everything. In nations around the world that I have visited on your behalf as a senator, people yearning for freedom and people recently free have come and spoken about how much the American example means to them. Earlier this year, I was at a global security conference, concerned about what was happening in our nation, about our division and the dialogue, and I heard 3 young parliamentarians from other countries talk about how hard they were working. Part of our job, Mr. Speaker, as senators, is to ask hard questions, is to pose challenges, is to test the cabinet of the president, to visit federal facilities, to ask questions that are sometimes uncomfortable or unwelcome. Just this week, I was at 3 committee hearings and had 3 members of the cabinet in front of me. Did they want to answer my questions? Probably not, but they did. If a senator of the United States who identifies himself as a senator in at least the video I just saw, gets handled this way, gets thrown to the ground and handcuffed, what is happening to those who have no such title or voice? If this gentle and decent and caring man is treated this way, what is happening along the margins, in the dark spaces, in the places we cannot see? So, Mr. President, I call on my Republican friends and colleagues to look hard at this moment and say, what comes next? What comes next? Are we to be at risk of arrest if we threaten to ask a question or deign to interrupt? Is our very service here as senators hanging in the balance in this moment as we all learn more of the facts of what happened in Los Angeles? The future of what will happen here in our country and in the world will wait on your answer. Was this an over-response? Was this a misuse of force? Was this a disrespect of the very Senate itself? Is this a moment when, as our founders who wrote the Federalist Papers dreamed, my colleagues in the Senate will show their loyalty to the role, to the check and balance, to the independence of the Senate, more than they will show their loyalty to their party and their president, and demand an answer, an apology, and a different path forward? Or is this a moment when all of us will watch this video of our friend, a member of the Judiciary Committee, a representative, a senator of Los Angeles in the state of California, being roughly mishandled and say, too bad. At least it wasn't me. If we answer this moment with silence, we will be damned. And our children and the world will say they didn't really mean it. The members of my family who served in the U.S. military knew that signing on that line meant being willing to give everything. And I believe, and have been told, that they understood that service to be in service of freedom. Not in service of any particular president or party, any particular state or moment, but in service of democracy. Democracy is a fragile flower, and around the world, people look to what we do to know what they should do. There are petty, tin pot dictators, authoritarians, and strongmen around the world who will watch this video and be encouraged and think this is the way to silence their critics. I can't imagine a member of this chamber who knows Alex Padilla, who's had the blessing of sitting with him in moments when he's asked questions or engaged in discourse, who thinks of him as anything other than a reasoned, reasonable, mild-mannered senator. But even if he were not, even if he were outspoken, loud, aggressive, annoying, the title senator and the role that we have should entitle him to ask a question at a press conference. If the result is this mistreatment, heaven help us all, and heaven help our democracy. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, I thank my friend and colleague from New Jersey, and it's hard to contain our emotion appropriately on the Senate floor. This is a moment that every American should be outraged about, and every American should be angry. And not only angry about what happened to Senator Padilla, but fearful for our democracy, because we are at a crossroads when it comes to the rule of law and respect for our democracy and our Constitution in the United States of America. I felt compelled to cancel the rest of my meetings this evening to come right here to the floor to join my colleagues in speaking out, not just for a fellow senator, but for the future of the rule of law and due process in the United States of America. I had to rewind that video like 3 or 4 times to see if this was really happening. And I saw the earlier video come out of him being essentially dragged out of the room, roughed up, and then the other video of him lying on his stomach, handcuffed, with people standing around him. Mr. President, then the lies went out. Senator from New Jersey just mentioned it. I'm reading this statement from the Department of Homeland Security. Senator Padilla chose disrespectful political theater, interrupted a live press conference without identifying himself. That's a lie. Just look at the video. You can see him coming in and saying, I'm Senator Padilla, the senior senator from California. He wanted to ask a question. We all have a lot of questions. He's the United States Senator. He should be able to ask a question about what's happening in his state of California. You know, we had the President of the United States just a few weeks ago, in response to a question, say he wasn't sure if he had to comply with the Constitution of the United States. The President of the United States, who's sworn to take an oath to uphold the Constitution, said he wasn't sure if he had to comply with the Constitution. You have senior administration officials like Steve Miller talking about suspending habeas corpus in the United States of America. Habeas corpus is the core to due process that makes sure that people cannot be deprived of their liberty without a fair trial and a fair hearing. And here we have Alex Padilla going in to ask a question, and he's tackled, he's roughed up, he's dragged out of the room, he's put on the floor and handcuffed. This is a president who also the other day when asked if he would arrest the governor of California or whether his people should arrest the governor of California, he said, yeah, I think maybe they should. Think about that. This is an administration that arrested the mayor of a major city. This is lawless behavior from this administration. This is what a dictatorship looks like. This is what happens when one person tries to grab all the power. When they say, I don't know if I have to comply with the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States is designed to have checks and balances. It's designed to make sure that our liberties are protected. The Bill of Rights protect all of us. And yet you see the President of the United States and his henchmen and his henchwomen trampling over due process, trampling over the First Amendment in the country, and trampling on a United States senator from California who said, Madam Secretary, I have a question. I'm looking forward to hearing about what question Senator Padilla wanted to ask. Because I know Senator Padilla, and I know he had a good question to ask of the Secretary of Homeland Security, but he didn't get a chance. This was a press conference. Secretary of Homeland Security is taking questions. The United States Senator representing the people of that state, elected to represent the people of that state, he had a question. He didn't get to ask it because he was dragged out of the room and thrown on the floor and arrested. I want to know what that question was going to be. And I know that Senator Padilla will tell us. We'll probably find out then why the Secretary of Homeland Security didn't want to hear the question. Because this administration wants to shut down questions except for from the journalists that they like. They belittle journalists who ask them any question that they see as critical. That's also what authoritarian leaders do. They push aside the people who ask hard but meaningful questions and just call on the people that will ask them the slow ball question. You've already seen this at play in the Oval Office during press conferences that the president has. He goes, "Oh, I like that reporter." "Oh, that's a terrible question." What he means is it's a question that he doesn't like. And usually the questions he doesn't like are questions that are right on target and go to the heart of what's happening in our country. And so Senator Padilla had a question. He just didn't get a chance to answer it. Now, I want to build on another point my colleagues have made, and that is a real appeal to our Senate Republican colleagues. Because in these first months, 4 or 5 months of the Trump administration, we've seen the actions of a lawless president. You know, it's unprecedented in the United States to have over 260 lawsuits filed in federal courts, right? This doesn't happen normally. It's because of the massive law-breaking that we've seen going on. Attacks on civil liberties, attacks on due process as part of that, attacks on the First Amendment, the illegal withholding of funds that have been appropriated by the Congress. The courts can't do it alone, colleagues. Every member of this body is sworn to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution the President of the United States now says he's not sure if he has to comply with. I believe senators here want to take those constitutional responsibilities seriously. But if we're going to do that, we have to stand up at moments like this. Not Democratic senators alone, but Republican senators too. Because if you let the executive do this to Senator Alex Padilla today, some other executive, some other president can do it to somebody else tomorrow. If you can do this to Senator Alex Padilla, imagine how vulnerable other citizens and others in this country are to this kind of tyranny and abuse. So I hope this will be a moment, Mr. President, where people come together and stand up and say, regardless of policy differences on different issues, we're all here to debate those issues and disagree, but there's some things that we should consider fundamental and sacrosanct. And that is the idea of rule of law and due process. And what we witnessed here was the outrage that we are come to see in countries with authoritarian leaders. That's what we witnessed. And it's a pattern. But today was the most graphic example to date where a United States senator was essentially taken down as he introduced himself and said, "I have a question." So I have a question for all of our colleagues. What are we going to do about it? Who are we? What do we stand for? Are we going to uphold the Constitution? So I'm looking forward to hearing the question Senator Padilla wanted to ask, but I also ask all of us a question. And that is, are we going to use this moment to stand up for decency and to stand up for the fair treatment of every American? And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
I have no words to describe just the absurdity of this moment and the dangers to our country and our union. For us to be able to stand here on the floor of the Senate, in this chamber that many such important decisions have been made in a place of deliberation, it is not only in this room that we as senators should be able to voice the concerns that we have about the direction of our country and the problems that our nation faces. That we get to be sworn in as United States senators. That we try to do our best, that we are U.S. senators, that United States senators, that we represent this entire nation as a body. And the idea that just, as I just saw the video, one of my colleagues here thrown to the floor, handcuffed, humiliated. It is not a humiliation of that individual senator, it is a humiliation of this body. The shamefulness by which that was perpetrated. That Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, shame upon those that instigated this, that followed through on this. It is something that all of us collectively need to stand against. This isn't about partisanship. It's about what does this institution, what does this body mean, and whether or not our words and our actions, as dictated by our oath that we swear to the Constitution of Article 1 as well, that lays out what our job is, that is very much under threat right now. And I feel for my colleague. I don't know what is happening right now. I hope that we are able to get greater clarity about that. But what we see and what we saw in that video transpire, I hope that is something that every American in this country sees. That they see the actions that have taken place. And as someone who has worked in other nations, I worked in diplomacy and national security, I worked in nations with authoritarian leadership. I never thought I would see anything like this here at home. Transpire here in the way that we saw it unfold. Again, the humiliation befalls our body as a whole. Now the question is, what will the Senate do to stand up for ourselves? And that is something that I hope every single senator is thinking about right now. This is not a time to put your finger up in the air and figure out which way the wind is blowing. Try to think through what type of reaction might come from the White House if we speak out against this. This is a time for us to stand up together and stand up for each other and for this institution. And not just right now, it's about what credibility do we have as a body going forward. And I know, I get it, I'm new here. I'm one of the newer members here. I came here, I wanted to serve in this body because of what it stood for. I wanted to serve in this institution because I believe that this is an institution of incredible honor, integrity, and even at this challenging moment in this country's history, we need this body to be able to come together. So I call on all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to condemn this action, to stand united with one voice, standing up for ourselves. Otherwise, we will just cast ourselves to the margins of irrelevance in this nation right now. What point is it for us to stand up and show up to work every day if this is the kind of treatment that can befall any of us in this day right now in this country? I am outraged, and I hope others are too. This is not a time to be silent. This is a time for us to be united and show the rest of the country what this institution means. Otherwise, we might as well go home. I, for one, want to fight for my colleague, fight for each other, fight for the Senate, and fight for our democracy. With that, I'll yield back.
Mr. President.
Senator. Congressman, what was your reaction to Senator Padilla and that altercation with DHS agents?
I mean, I think we need to see this for what it is. There's two grave and extremely alarming elements to what just happened. First and foremost, a United States Senator who identified himself as such, who sought a question, pursuing his constitutional duty and ability to conduct oversight, to ask a cabinet secretary a question, was assaulted, thrown to the floor, and arrested. And then secondly, what is also deeply alarming is that the Department of Homeland Security under Secretary Kristi Noem has gone to the public and lied on record saying that he did not identify himself when there is video evidence that they are being dishonest with the American people. There must be a retraction. We must have an investigation of what just happened. This is a deeply alarming escalation in the violence of the Trump administration. They have released chaos and unleashed chaos in the city of Los Angeles by violently raiding and ripping apart peaceful public spaces. And now they're tackling and they are arresting United States sitting members of Congress while going on the record and lying about what happened. This is an out-of-control agency, and there must be consequences.
Do you think that this sends a message not only to yourself, but other lawmakers who want to go out and be able to ask questions to different secretaries?
Of course, for an administration that has talked about free speech, the First Amendment, respect for the rule of law, we are seeing that they are threatening judges. They are arresting judges for people who do not rule in the way that they agree with. They have openly talked about punishing Supreme Court justices for not ruling in the way that they want them to rule. They are falsely and egregiously indicting members of Congress on baseless accusations. They are being incredibly reckless in what they're doing, and this is all coming down not to the facts, not to crime, not to the law, but to political intimidation. And we will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. If they want to come in and arrest every member of Congress, they can come and get us. But at some point, the Republican Party and the Senate, the United States Republican Senate, needs to decide what is an impeachable offense. Because at a certain point, it will not be about Democrats and Republicans. They will start going after Republican senators who do not do what they want. So what kind of environment do we want here in America?
According to Congressman Issa, things have already begun to smooth over between Kristi Noem as well as Mr. Padilla. They've already exchanged phone numbers, and they've already said that the charges are not going to be filed whatsoever. So can you talk to this already, that basically they've started communicating?
I find it very interesting that the Secretary of Homeland Security somehow is claiming to not recognize or know who the United States Senator for the state of California is, when her express job is to be interacting with us all the time. She knows who I am. She better know who he is, because she's been all up in the city of Los Angeles, and we're supposed to believe that she doesn't know who the two United States senators for the state of California are? No. Thank you.
Thank you. We have to go.
Lower.
We need you guys to get lower.
I think all of us are still in some state of shock over the video that we just watched a half an hour ago of one of the most respected leaders in all of the Congress, Alex Padilla, a person of just unquestioned integrity, someone who has brought great compassion for the people of our state and country to the U.S. Senate. To see him abused that way, to see him brought down to the ground, to see him go to a press conference to ask questions, which is not only his right but his obligation, and to be mishandled that way. This is an assault not only on the person of Alex Padilla, but it's an assault on our democracy. This is an administration that has no respect for our democracy, for our institutions, for the separation of powers, for a co-equal branch of government. It has no respect for the people of California. This is a president who would call in military troops against the wishes of our own government when it would only inflame the matter. And now this terrible abuse of this wonderful public servant. One of the things that I treasure about the U.S. Senate is you can come from anywhere, you can start from anywhere, and you can end up in the U.S. Senate. And no one better embodies that part of the American dream and the dream of our democracy than Alex Padilla. That's right. And there he is, going to this press conference to advocate for those who are most vulnerable, to ask the questions that need to be answered, like what is the basis under the law or Constitution over the objection of the governor to federalize the Guard to be used against our own people in California? What is the lawful basis, if any, for that action? And if not, what should the consequences be? I understand why Secretary Noem doesn't want to answer these questions, because she can't. But it is Alex Padilla's job to ask those questions and to demand those answers. And we are proud of him. We are proud of him. We are proud of his courage and his steadfastness and his vigorous representation of the people of California. And we cherish his voice, and we will not let this stand. Thank you.
Democrat Leader Jeffries.
Trump administration is a disgrace. Secretary Noem is a disgrace. The manhandling of Senator Alex Padilla was a complete and total disgrace. Senator Padilla is a good man, a decent man, a patriotic man, and a hardworking man. He's the very embodiment of what a United States senator should represent in this great country of ours, anchored in the principle of self-government. He was at that press conference doing his job, asking questions about what is taking place in California, the state that he represents, and on behalf of the American people. And he was recklessly and aggressively manhandled. That was unacceptable. It was unconscionable. It was unpatriotic. It's un-American. And every single person who was involved in manhandling Senator Padilla should be held accountable to the full extent of the law. So this is not going to end until there is accountability and until the Trump administration changes its behavior. This administration is not about law and order. It's about lawlessness and disorder. And that's what we've seen from day one of the Trump administration. When Donald Trump pardoned hundreds of violent felons who brutally assaulted the Capitol right behind us. Day one, this administration has been about lawlessness and disorder, and we see a continuing escalation of it. And we're going to make sure that we push back aggressively in every way possible to hold those individuals accountable who, without justification, manhandled Senator Alex Padilla. I'm here today as House Democratic leader to make it clear. We stand with Senator Padilla. We stand with the California delegation. We stand with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and we stand with the American people.
The video was absolutely sickening. It's almost unwatchable to see anybody treated that way. And to see one of my colleagues who I know well, who I have nothing but the greatest admiration for, it just made me sick. It turned my stomach. And he is owed first an apology, and then we need an investigation about how that happened and how a U.S. Senator came to be treated that way in the United States of America in the year 2025. Under the speech and debate clause, we have the right to ask questions. Under the First Amendment, we have the right to ask questions. And you don't throw people to the ground and manhandle them and handcuff them simply because they ask a question. And I can guarantee you that if they had thrown Mitch McConnell to the ground like that, or John Thune to the ground like that, the Republicans would be out protesting. And I don't think any member of Congress should be treated like that simply for doing their job, whether it's a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent.
President, 2 days from today, June 14, is Flag Day in the United States. It's the day every year where we celebrate the flag, but it's not the piece of cloth that we celebrate. We celebrate core American values. And the most core American value is the one that we take an oath of office to, the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution includes a Bill of Rights, and one of the most important pieces of the Bill of Rights is the First Amendment. It was drafted by Virginian James Madison. And it talks about the fact that there can't be laws or legal restrictions against the right of the people to peacefully assemble and petition government for redress of grievances. That right is not something we're allowed. That right is something we're guaranteed. My colleague and our friend, Alex Padilla, born and raised in Los Angeles, loves his hometown, an MIT-educated, baseball-playing engineer who returned to his home
who served on the Los Angeles City Council and now serves in this body, has some very legitimate questions about why, in an unprecedented way, the National Guard and the United States Marines have been deployed into his city over the objections of the mayor, over the objections of the governor, in a historically unprecedented way, and in a way such as to escalate tensions in his town rather than to reduce them. So he decided to go to a peaceful public assembly. It was a press conference. It wasn't a private meeting to which he was not allowed entrance. A press conference's purpose is to share information with the public. My colleague, Alex Padilla, who goes to Wednesday prayer breakfast with me every week with a bipartisan group of colleagues, attended a public event so he could ask a question about why his hometown was being besieged by Marines and National Guard over the objection of the mayor and the objection of the governor. His question was a grievance. He doesn't agree with the policies of the administration. He is guaranteed in this document the right to petition government for redress of grievances. As an American, this is what we are supposed to do. The framers of the Constitution that put this in the First Amendment did it to protect the rights of Alex Padilla and all of us, but they did it for another reason. They did it because they believed it would help democracy work better. That democracy works better when people can speak freely. Democracy works better when people can profess their religion, when the press can operate freely, and democracy works better when people can gather peacefully and share their dissenting points of view. It makes our democracy work better. Make no mistake, the effort to manhandle our colleague, to push him out of the room for asking an inconvenient question, to handcuff him, is an attempt to shut him up. It's an attempt to shut everybody up if you have a dissenting view from this administration. That's why the administration has deployed the military in an unprecedented way. They want to intimidate you. They want to make you decide that although you are granted this as a right, they want to make you afraid to exercise the right. And so as I conclude, I would just say this. On Flag Day, I would encourage Americans of all kinds, find a peaceful assembly on June 14th, on Flag Day, and attend it, and show that you are a brave and patriotic American that embraces the First Amendment to the Constitution, and you will not allow anyone to intimidate you. I was a missionary in Honduras in 1980 and 81, and it was an authoritarian society, and no one was guaranteed the right to assemble or complain. You might do it and be okay one day, the next day you might be arrested, the next day you might be disappeared or even killed. That's not who we are. We need brave, patriotic Americans to stand up, just as Senator Padilla has done, and insist upon their right to peacefully assemble and present whatever critiques or complaints they have about policies that they find to be objectionable. With that, I yield the floor.
As the senator from Oregon.
Thank you. I ask the quorum call be vitiated.
The Senate is not in a quorum call.
I've come to the floor to say I'm extremely outraged that the executive branch's security team have shoved a U.S. senator out of a room, have proceeded to put that U.S. senator on the ground and to handcuff that senator. This is what we expect to see in authoritarian nations. They can't tolerate a question, and they start to attack the institutions. This is what we're seeing in the U.S. right now. We're seeing it in the form of the president willfully breaking the law on the rules controlling the executive branch time and time again. We see it in his attack on the press, his attack on the universities, his attack on extorting law firms. We see it in the form of his using the Trump versus United States lawsuit to say, I, the president, am above the law, and I can issue pardons, so the whole executive branch is above the law. That is not the way it works in a republic. At least it's not the way it works if we are a republic. If we, through a subservient Congress and a combination with a deferential Supreme Court, slide into this authoritarian state, then we have failed our oath to the Constitution. It is absolutely wrong that any U.S. senator, for attempting to ask a question, be treated in this fashion. I double down on the call of Leader Schumer. This merits a full bipartisan investigation. Bipartisan because all of us are members of the legislative branch. All of us have taken an oath to the Constitution, and all of us should stand up for each other and certainly our ability to explore the policies of this administration. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in just 1 week, this administration has sent ICE to conduct raids into my community to meet arbitrary deportation quotas. They have unnecessarily sent National Guard and Marines, which have only inflamed peaceful protests, and they have thrown down to the ground a U.S. Senator, my U.S. Senator, and handcuffed him for trying to ask questions to a DHS Secretary Noem. This is happening because the administration does not like that they have different opinions from, that they have different opinions from the state of California. My constituents deserve more from the president. Our democracy deserves more from the president. I stand with all Californians who want to keep pushing and keep using our voice and keep peacefully protesting the actions of this lawless president. I yield back.
Now, throughout this country's history, we've had conflict, we've had tumult, but we've never had a tyrant as a commander-in-chief. And that is not by coincidence. It's because the American people have always been willing to speak up and exercise their First Amendment right to protest, especially when our fundamental rights have been threatened. And as the proud son of immigrants from Mexico, it's that same right that I came to revere when marching through the streets with my family and my friends in 1994 in Los Angeles, protesting against the vile anti-immigrant rhetoric that was growing in California at that time. It was that year that a Republican governor was up for re-election and was down in the polls. And he turned to scapegoating immigrants to try to improve his political standing and his re-election chances. That fight is what inspired me to leave an engineering career behind and dedicate myself to trying to influence our government and our politics. So I've seen this before. California has seen this before. So last week, when I heard something so blatantly un-American from the Secretary of Homeland Security, a cabinet official, of course I was compelled, both as a senator and as an American, to speak up. But before I could even get out my question, I was physically and aggressively forced out of the room, even as I repeatedly announced I was a United States Senator and I had a question for the Secretary. And even as the National Guardsman and the FBI agent who served as my escorts and brought me into that press briefing room stood by, silently, knowing full well who I was. You've seen the video. I was pushed and pulled, struggled to maintain my balance. I was forced to the ground, first on my knees, and then flat on my chest. And as I was handcuffed and marched down a hallway, repeatedly asking, why am I being detained? Not once did they tell me why. I pray you never have a moment like this. But I will tell you, in that moment, a lot of questions came to my mind. First of all, where are they taking me? Because I know I'm not just being escorted out of the building. Am I being arrested here? And what will a city already on edge from being militarized think when they see their United States senator being handcuffed just for trying to ask a question? And what will my wife think? What will our boys think? And I also remember asking myself, if this aggressive escalation is the result of someone speaking up against the abuses and overreach of the Trump administration, was it really worth it? But colleagues, how many Americans in our nation's history have marched, have protested, have shed blood, even lost their lives to protect our rights? How many Americans have served in wars overseas to protect our freedoms here at home? And how many Americans in the year 2025 see a vindictive president on a tour of retribution, unrestrained by the majority of this separate and co-equal branch of government, and wonder if it's worth it to stand up or to speak out? If a United States senator becomes too afraid to speak up, how can we expect any other American to do the same?